All righty, we'll get started. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Drexel Owusu, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer here at the Dallas Foundation. I have the privilege to lead an outstanding team of grant makers focused on improving the lives and community of Dallas. And we are incredibly excited to share a lot more about our new fund focused on racial equity. We have been sort of blessed to have generous support from a number of donors to launch this Dallas Foundation Fund focused on racial equity, which will enable us to fund new investments focusing on closing equity gaps in our community for all of our residents, and especially for our BIPOC communities. We're incredibly grateful to our donors who have enabled and allow us to do this work. And we are incredibly excited to work with and partner with all of our nonprofit and municipal partners to make change in our community a reality. I want to start by first defining and articulating what we mean when we say racial equity. In particular, we know that race is a very accurate predictor of one's outcomes in our community. And we are striving to achieve a scenario and situation in which race is no longer an accurate predictor of one's social outcome or ability to reach your full potential. We're grateful to have copied that from the City of Dallas resolution on racial equity. We know that our partners in Dallas ISD and several other communities around Dallas have also adopted strong postures focused on racial equity. And we too want you to know that we support and believe that we want to get to a circumstance and situation in which race is not a predictor of outcome for anybody in our community. So why are we doing this now? I won't give you a long history lesson, but I think we all understand and acknowledge that race has played a significant role and factor in America effectively since its founding. Right, America was discovered by a white or European settler in 1492, even though it was a land filled with many, many indigenous people. We know that in 1619, slavery began in our country, or what became our country, and that lasted for a period of almost 250 years until the end of the Civil War. We know that for another 100 years after that, Black and people of color in our community had to fight uphill battles to tackle and address what we call Jim Crow segregation in our country until the mid-60s. And we know that even in the last 60 years since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of '64, we continue to face inequities in outcomes, in systems, in all sorts of places and forms, even today. And so we think it's really important context for us to all understand that even what we consider an equal playing field has only existed for a very short amount of time in our community. Dallas in particular has a long and fraught history with race since its founding, in which we had a significant slave population back in the 1840s all the way into the 1860 census. We know that Dallas was one of the first cities in Texas and certainly in the country to allow racial housing segregation. We know that in the 30s and 40s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation enabled and allowed for redlining, which created communities of risk that were largely focused on people of color. We know in the 50s that we had explicit policies around highway development, where we placed infrastructure that created and allowed for sort of environmental injustice across our community and displacement. We know that institutional racism existed in our school systems, right? From a desegregation order that was put in place in the 70s, literally 20 years after Brown v. Board, that lasted all the way until the 2000s. And we know that even today, many of our schools remain highly segregated. We know that illegal dumping and environmental injustice has continued even until today or until recently. And we're appreciative and grateful for the modest progress that we've made, but we know that there is a long way to go. And so we think that this background is sort of important context for understanding why there's a need for a racial equity fund, and why the Dallas Foundation thinks it's time for us to be deep investors in addressing the inequities of our community. As I mentioned, we know that these inequities and disparities exist at basically every turn in life, from a lack of prenatal care, to under-resourced neighborhoods and housing, to lesser quality educational outcomes, to lower household income and a lack of wealth in our Black and Hispanic communities. We know that the criminal justice system is often slanted or tilted crosswise to communities of color, and we know that health outcomes and the lack of access to good and quality food continues to drive inequity even today. We like to say here at the Dallas Foundation that from womb to tomb, we know that inequities exist in every corner of our community. And what we are committed to doing is addressing that by purposefully and forcefully investing disproportionately to remediate or address these inequities. We know that nothing is going to change unless we are purposeful in our efforts. And so we are launching this fund explicitly with the goal to purposely try to address all of these gaps in our community. We know we won't succeed in the first year, but we think it is critically important for us to begin the work of really thinking deeply and investing purposely to tackle and address these inequities. So that's what we're doing. That's what this fund is all about, to use our influence and our resources at the Dallas Foundation to partner with our donors and other community partners to advance equity for our BIPOC residents by purposely and systematically focusing our investments on these inequities, right? We have named 5 domains that are of critical importance to us. We know that there are probably many, many more, and we hope, even if we aren't naming them here, that you will still think about how you apply and participate in this work going forward, so that we can continue to improve our platform and our funds, our fund access to enable the work that is happening in our community. In particular, we want to focus on these 5 domains: housing and infrastructure, economic empowerment, education and workforce, criminal justice and civic participation, and health and wellness. Those are the 5 domains that we know our research shows are huge areas of opportunity for us to continue to do better and better every day. And we look forward to partnering with our nonprofits to make that happen. So what are we going to do? We have tried to set up a very easy, for lack of a better word, process for us to administer a grant program. We've created a simple grant application. I hope, I don't anticipate it taking too terribly long or requiring you to submit tons of forms and backup for your information. And we hope that folks will think about how they're participating and thinking about this work collaboratively. We want people to think about working together to solve these problems, as opposed to everybody trying to do it on their own. We know at the Dallas Foundation, we can't do it on our own. And so we're very eager to support collective impact efforts across our communities. We are very focused explicitly on Dallas County. After all, we are the Dallas Foundation. And we would love to partner with any organization that is a 501c3 nonprofit. If you're not yet a 501c3 nonprofit, we're happy to talk to you about how we could support or help you achieve your goals and missions. We don't want that to be a barrier to your participation in this process, although it would certainly make our lives a little easier and be helpful. But we want to make sure we are partnering with you and making sure that those gaps aren't barriers to success in our community. Again, the need in our community is great, and we need everybody working together to make it happen. We also want to partner with our municipalities, right? We know our cities, our county, our school districts, and many other municipal organizations are working hard on inculcating and imbuing equity in their work. And to the extent we can be helpful in addressing and moving that forward, we want you to consider applying for this work too. We want all of our applicants, of course, to have clear non-discrimination policies and practices that explicitly address racial equity. We think it's impossible for us to affect change if we don't in fact know what we are trying to change. And so I hope anybody who applies will be thinking about how they are being clear in their non-discrimination and or in their practices that will focus on addressing equity. Some basic grant parameters, I'll run through these fairly quickly. We know that we are going to have a floor of $25,000 for our grant making, and we're setting a high cap at $250,000 because we know that this work can sometimes be expensive, and we want to make sure we aren't missing the mark or otherwise missing the opportunity to really move the needle on important work. Our grant funding will be unrestricted as a general matter with some limited uses. One is that we don't want you to spend it actually doing the DEI training. I'll come back to why that is in a moment. And we also, of course, want to explicitly prohibit any use of these funds for political campaigning. You can certainly do some educational work where we welcome that, but we want to explicitly avoid politics in our work. And then last but not least is we want to prioritize organizations that are also living the work of trying to increase their diversity. We want to prioritize organizations that have diversity in their leadership and in their board, or we want to prioritize organizations that are principally serving communities of color. We will look at all applications. So if you do not meet that, that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply, but we are purposely going to weight ourselves to focus on organizations that do prioritize racial diversity in their staffs, in their leadership, and in their communities. As I mentioned, we're focused on 5 key domains: housing and infrastructure, economic empowerment, education and workforce, criminal justice and civic participation, and health and wellness. Those are the named domains. Again, when you get into the application, which we'll talk about in a moment, there'll be an option for you to select other if you aren't doing work in any of those spaces. But we thought it was really important for us to be clear about where we know there's evidence that there is need for us to tackle and address more. Our grant applications have opened. They opened on Monday, March 21st, and they'll remain open until the end of April. So you have a good 6-week period to build a coalition, to do the deep thinking and work around what you are trying to do in addressing racial equity, and still submit a grant application to us. We will make decisions about those grants in May and into June, and we'll communicate our decisions and our grants by the end of June. In addition, we want to do some of the deep thinking to support our nonprofits who are doing this work or who end up becoming grantees. And we are going to be driving a cohort learning model or networking model to support our nonprofits. We want to make sure that these nonprofits, or you as nonprofits, have access to DEI training, which is why we prohibited it earlier. We want to fund that work. We think it's important for us to be aligned in that work. We want to make sure you're having opportunities to come together and learn more about how to communicate and do your storytelling around the work, how we're making sure you as leaders or staff are getting the resources that you need. And of course, we want to make sure we help you continue to build the muscle to fundraise further and continue to get more and more grant funding to empower and enable your work. We, of course, want to share best practices and updates across all of these projects. We think it's important for this group to work together, for everybody to know what you are doing, and so that other people can sign on and join into your work. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to participate in topical discussions. We think it's critically important for everybody to be singing from the same songbook. And in order to enable and do that, we want to make sure we're funding speakers that are of interest to our grantees. And last but not least is we think it's important for you to be able to network with the Dallas Foundation, with our donors, with our community leaders, and all sorts of folks who might need to know about your work or know a lot more about it. So that is what we are very interested in. We will continue to fund this work with our commitment to our grantees, that we will make sure you have the resources necessary to be successful both now and into the future. I want to cover really quickly just how will we understand that we are making an impact on our racial equity. We know that there's data everywhere, and it's critically important for us at the foundation to be thinking about how we are going to assess and measure our impact to understand what is moving the needle, sometimes faster, sometimes not as fast, in our communities. And so we are going to partner with a coterie of really outstanding educational organizations, data-centered organizations, and community partners to make sure you are going to have access to all the data you need to understand what is working in your community and what is not. We are proud to partner with CPAL and the Commit partnership with the Chamber of Commerce here in town, certainly with our educational institutions, as well as the city of Dallas. And we will continue to report publicly on our findings and data and outcomes as we look forward to the future. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and partner in this work, Brittany Trusty, to share a lot more about the actual process of application. Brittany?
All right, thanks, Drex. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So in case you're not aware, the Dallas Foundation rolled out a brand new online grant making portal this year. So if you have not applied for a grant from us in 2022, you'll need to create a new account. If you have applied, then you're good to go and you already have an account with our system. Drex, I don't think I can move the slides forward. Oh, maybe I can. Okay, so how do you get to our portal? When you go to our website, you'll see these 4 buckets here at the top that are bolded: who we are, what we do, give and advise, and connect. When you click on what we do, you'll scroll down to grants and opportunities, and you'll land on this page just below some children running in a playground. So you'll see here the access to TDF's online grant portal. That's where you will click. Do not click here under my TDF login. That is for our donors only. So I apologize for any confusion there, but you'll click there. Okay, yeah. And then it will take you to our new portal landing page. So again, if you have submitted a field of interest grant application, or you were a part of Aware Dallas's application process or MetroCrest Hospital Authority's process this year, you already have an account with us. You can just enter your email address, password. If you forgot your password, there's a hyperlink here that you can click on. If you do not have an account with us and you have not submitted a grant application, you'll just need to click on Create New Account. And here's where it gets a little confusing. If someone in your organization has already submitted an application through our new system, but you have not, you will need to email me and I can add you to the existing organization record. However, if your organization is brand new to this portal, you can click on Create New Account. Okay, next. Okay, so you will either, there's 2 places you can land. If you're an existing user, you will land on your dashboard. So you'll need to locate this apply button here in the red box and click on that. If you're a brand new organization and this is your first time to register for our system, you will land right here on the landing page of the racial equity application. And you will need to click here on this blue apply button when you are ready to start your application. Next. So you'll see, as Drex mentioned, it's a pretty streamlined application. We only ask for 1 uploaded document, and that's actually optional. So there are 4 sections. There's the applicant overview. There's the applicant racial demographics. We want to know a little bit more about the racial equity work you plan to do. And then you have a choice on how you would like to submit the remainder of your application. So we'll go through each of these briefly. Under applicant overview, mission statement, project name, amount requested, and if possible, a project budget. Well, this is an optional question, but it would really be great to know a little bit more about your expenses and what your projected work will look like. Under the racial demographics information, we're really looking for a racial breakdown of your organization's board, the leadership, the staff, and the population you serve. The population you serve could be like the folks you served in your last completed fiscal year. So you can go back and look at those records. Racial equity information section, that's really where we're starting to get into the meat of the application. What domain or domains, you can select more than one, do you plan to focus on? The housing and infrastructure, economic empowerment, education and workforce, any of those. What's your geographic focus? This can be neighborhoods, zip codes, general West Dallas area, wherever it might be. And then we have provided you with some racial equity measures. You can select up to 2 that you think you will make an impact on. So there might be more that you think you can address, but you can only select up to 2 at this point. And then the real meat of the application is in the next section, where you'll tell us about your plan to address racial inequities, any partner organizations you think you might be working with, and how you're going to measure your impact. And on this next slide, we'll look and see, this is the part of the information where you can submit either written or through video. So on the written side, if you choose to do it this way, the written format in 500 words or less, you'll need to explain how you plan to address racial inequity in the domain or domains that you have selected. We'd like to know more about your partner organizations, how you plan to work together to improve racial inequities, how you will measure the impact of your work, and really how can the Dallas Foundation support your data needs in doing that. If you decide to submit these final 3 questions in a video format, we do not want you to exceed 5 minutes in length if possible. We do not want you to go out and hire any production staff, literally on a handheld device, phone or tablet. Videos will be reviewed for content, not for quality. And you can't actually upload the video to the application. You'll be asked to share the URL to the video. And so you can upload that in a video sharing platform such as YouTube or Vimeo. In the past, when we've done video submissions, people have sent us links to a SharePoint account or your OneDrive of some sort. So really any way we can access it is acceptable. And I think that's it, yeah.
Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate the overview. I hope you will find this process to be non-onerous and relatively easy. We are certainly excited about what is to come. We are thrilled and honored to be able to partner and work with nonprofits and municipal partners in our community to really move the needle for our people of color, for our communities of color, and for to address the inequities that we know have been caused both by policy and practice in Dallas for a long time. We wanted to make sure we lay out sort of the timeline so everybody understands what is ahead. We've tried to belabor this before. We will continue to make the point very clear. We are looking at right now a grant application window that is open from March 21st to April the 30th. We will close that's a Saturday. April the 30th is a Saturday, and we'll close the application window at midnight that night. So you have a fairly wide window to submit an application.
Rex, can I interject? I just wanted to say, because it is a Saturday, please do not wait till the very last minute to make sure there are no issues with you being able to log in. I will be keeping an eye on email. I tend to go to sleep before midnight. So just want to make sure that you don't wait till the very last minute. That's it.
Right. Thank you, Brittany. The grant application window is open, and we encourage you to be thinking about and otherwise getting ahead of this work now. We will be making decisions about grants in May and into June, and then sort of after mid-June, our hope is to share and announce this work and to support you with the cohort going forward. And so we are really, really excited. We're very, again, blessed and grateful to our donors for enabling and allowing this work to get off the ground. We hope this is not the beginning or the only time we will do this. We hope and anticipate that we will continue to do this in the years going forward. But we think it is critically important for us to, again, be taking a first step today to addressing racial inequity in our community. We think it is important for all of us to acknowledge and note that these inequities exist, and that we are being purposeful about the effort to close the gaps that we know our communities of color are facing every day, with disproportionate investment in strategies that will help and improve everybody's lives. I will stop talking at you here. I'm gonna, in fact, I'm gonna keep this screen up, but I wanna make sure we give time and space to anybody who might have questions. I am pulling up the Q&A as we speak, so thank you for those who've already found that. If you haven't found it and you have a question, please make sure you drop it in the Q&A section, and we'll make sure we answer it here presently. I'm going to start with the first question I see here, which is, can you provide additional information about how success will be defined? And the short answer to that is it's going to be a little bit subjective. We are certainly endeavoring to create a rubric that I think will be reflective of what we just described, which is that we will give some outsized weight to organizations that prioritize diversity in their leadership, in their board, in their staff, and in their community. So that's probably the first and foremost factor. We know that we are trying to understand and will support organizations for whom we can understand what the work is. So being clear about the nature and scope and scale of your project or program, I think, is going to be really important. And we really want folks to be thinking about how we measure and assess the outcomes of your work. So those are probably the three biggest priorities that we are seeking or looking for in a grant application. To repeat that again, it's those who are prioritizing communities of color explicitly, or who are already, and who are also prioritizing communities of color in their staff, board, and leadership. We are interested in those who can clearly articulate the work that they intend to do, both the nature, scope, and scale of all of that work. And we want to prioritize organizations who have a clear understanding for how we would measure and or assess the outlook or the efforts that you undertake going forward. So having some clarity around how we might measure and assess that is going to be really important to us. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm going to the next one that I see on the list. For an org that is needing startup funds, can they apply, and how can they show their success? So that's a great question. The short answer to that is yes, we definitely are interested in helping an organization that might need startup funds. So we are not afraid, if you have not yet historically had a track record of any kind in doing this work. Again, to sort of name the work, what will matter is your ability to articulate clearly what you are going to do and why we should be funding it. That will, I think it can and should come through in our belief, but we are certainly not going to hold it against you that you might, today might be the first day your organization has ever existed. That is okay, and we are very excited to look at everybody fairly, equitably, and equally in this conversation. Third one, the video submission is very inclusive. Is there a description of what is included under civic participation? Yeah, so under civic participation, so you will note several things. One is under civic participation, as you go through the application, you'll note things like voter participation, it's enlistment of diverse candidates for municipal elections and whatnot. It's supporting organizations that are, you might be helping your city or the county, execute a plan in a community. Like those are all things that we consider civic participation. And so when we name that, when we mention that, what we're purposely trying to do is be a little bit deliberative around understanding, or maybe even vague, around recognizing that there are lots of ways to drive civic participation. What we are trying to do is improve and enhance folks' access and ability to participate in the civic process as a whole, including being candidates, as well as obviously voting rights. But we won't restrict it to only that. And if you have an innovative or interesting way to tackle or address that, we want to make sure we're naming that and looking to answer and consider your work fairly and equitably. Third, is there one award of 250 or are there multiple awards? The short answer to that is we will see how many applications and what those applications look like. We are very open to having multiple $250,000 grants. We know that the money we put forward in this fund, which we estimate will probably be somewhere on the order of magnitude of $3 million, is a drop in the bucket of the overall needs of our community. We know and recognize that we are starting a long journey, and there will be a lot of work for us to do. But we also think it's important for us to make sure we're putting our money where our mouth is. And so there will be multiple awards. If we get 8 great or 12 great applicants, all at $250,000, then great, we will fund all 12 of them. We think that this is really important. We also recognize that, look, there's probably going to be a lot of interest in this fund. We might make a lot of $25,000 grants as well. But we are very open to the idea of funding multiple large-scale awards out of this fund. Next question here. If funded through the racial equity grant, does that take for any other funding in the next 12 months? No. This is actually a blanket statement that I want to make as a whole, which is that we at the Dallas Foundation are relaxing, for lack of a better word, any restrictions on seeking other funding from us because you get a grant from us in any one particular area. Again, we think there are lots of people who can walk and chew gum. We want to make sure we can too. And so we are, just because you receive a grant from this fund doesn't make you ineligible for other Dallas Foundation funding, or just because you've received funding from other Dallas Foundation funds doesn't mean you are ineligible to receive a racial equity grant. We want everybody to feel open and able to apply. And we are going to make sure that nothing is held either against you, or it's not also a bonus, I guess, to have gotten a fund from us before. Flicking through the Q&A still. Can you elaborate on why organizations cannot propose DEI training? It's in hopes that of being more intentional in our racial equity work. So that's a great question, first off. So in particular, we think there are 2 things that we really wanted to focus on. One is that we want this work to be focused on closing gaps in our community. And DEI training, although it is an indirect way to help us think about those gaps, isn't a direct way of actually closing those gaps. So that's the first reason why we said no DEI training as a restriction of our grants. The second reason is because we want everybody to be aligned in thinking about this work together. And we think it is important as a cohort for our grantees to be getting DEI training of similar quality, shape, and experience. And so part of what we are also trying to do is make sure we're building a muscle in our community for us to be thinking about racial equity for a long, long time. And so we are hopeful that by consolidating and treating our cohort of grantees as one who are all getting great racial equity training or DEI training together, we might think about how they work together for a long, long time, not just because they got a grant in year 1 from the Dallas Foundation. So that's my answer to your question. Can applications describe multiple year projects and programs? Yes, is the answer to that question. We, of course, are very focused on year one because we know we have clarity of funding and fund access right now. So we're very interested in funding programs that we know we can get going in year one. We hope and anticipate we will continue to have racial equity resources going forward for hopefully many, many years. But as we stand today, we know we have 1 year of committed funds to make sure we're making investments. We are going to hold back some of the funds that so I mentioned we have about $3 million in funds available. We're going to hold back some of those funds to make sure that if we make a grant to somebody with a multi-year project, that we have the capacity to also have some dollars available in year two in the event that fundraising goes terribly for us and we don't end up with any additional resources. So it is fairly likely we will only be granting somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million in year one, with a little bit of money held back in case we need to fund somebody who might have a multi-year program. Continuing through the Q&A. Is there a situation where you feel it is stronger to submit the video version? So the short answer to that is no. We will treat both written applications and video applications equally. We are trying to make this actually a more convenient way for our nonprofits, for our grantees, to have access to the application. And we know that some people don't necessarily feel great or comfortable with their written application or their written skills. We don't want to hold that against you. We would love to see your face, tell us about your story. We also think that it's interesting for other folks or for people to have the ability to show us more than just what you could write. So we think video is an interesting way for us to continue to add to our grant applications. We will probably do more and more of this going forward. So it's the beginning of a process, not the end. But we will treat all of our applications equally, whether it's in writing or on video. If our work touches on several of the 5 areas, is there someone that we can talk to in order to clarify our application? Yes, so I will make sure I share my and Brittany's contact information here at the end of this a webinar, so everybody has it. But you can absolutely reach out. We would hope, again, you will be clear about what your work is, both in the nature, scope, and scale of what you are trying to do, and that you not try to bite off more than you can chew successfully in a year one grant. But we are certainly sort of open to and recognize that there probably are many opportunities for us to do or for somebody to have multiple areas that they touch in one application. Is there weight given to more established versus newer? Everybody's going to be treated the same in this process. So the short answer is no, there will be no additional weight given for an established organization relative to a new nonprofit. What we are interested in is how you are addressing inequity in our community. It is possible that you are addressing something that has never been done, and we want you to have a fair shake at this work, no matter how you look at it. So we are treating everybody equally. There will be no weight given to somebody who is established versus somebody who is not. To address the prenatal care, can postpartum doula program fit under this area of focus given so the short answer to that question is yes, absolutely. We think, again, there are lots of places for you to be thinking about this work that probably falls under our health and wellness category, if you will. But absolutely, we actually are purposely not assigning measures that we care about to specific areas because we recognize that those buckets are not mutually exclusive or comprehensively exhaustive. We recognize that some things fall in multiple buckets, and we want to make sure that you can apply. So we want you to name where you think it fits best. I guess that's how I would describe that. We are not headquartered in Texas, but we do serve the entire state, including Dallas. Does the majority of our client base need to reside in Dallas in order to be eligible to apply? So the short answer to that question is we are definitely very interested in serving or working with folks who are focused on Dallas County. You do not have to be based here to focus on Dallas County. You might have a program officer or somebody else who is explicitly sort of responsible for coordinating or leading work in Dallas. That is the work we are very interested in funding. So the short answer to that is you don't have to have the majority of your client base be here, but we do want your application to be focused on how you are addressing racial equity needs in Dallas. Again, being clear about the nature, scope, and scale of your work is going to be critically important. I'm continuing here. I wanted to ask, organization 100% BIPOC led, yet there's for work to be done in terms of reflecting the diversity of those who serve. So the question at hand is, would we, the Dallas Foundation, support capacity building and or strategy development for continuing to evolve an organization's racial equity strategy? The short answer to that is we are less than enthusiastic about that. I won't say the answer is no, but I don't think that the answer involves you naming the work and how you are going to close a gap for the community itself. And so I really want to make sure I stress that what we are interested in is making sure that the work of a nonprofit focused on closing gaps in our community is at the forefront of this work. We recognize that there may be opportunity or need to leverage those dollars for your own capacity in supporting that work, and we understand that. We would not hinder you in that, but we want to make sure that your application is focused on how you're going to serve the community. Next question here, does TDF have a preference or cap on percentage of an org's budget you're wanting to provide? The short answer to that is no. It is entirely possible that you will ask for $100,000 and that will cover the entirety of your budget to accomplish this, and that is more than fine. We're happy to be the only and sole funder of your work. Conversely, it is entirely possible that we're a very small and modest funder of a much bigger or larger organization, and that's possible too. Again, what we are interested in is that the work involves closing a gap in our community, that you can name and articulate that gap, and that we aren't otherwise going to restrict ourselves or otherwise box ourselves in to making sure we can provide resources and funding to make the gap closing a reality. Is there a way we can meet with the Dallas Foundation team member to talk through if our work is aligned? Again, we'll make sure you have our contact information at the end of this. If we can be a useful resource to you, we are happy and helpful or willing to do so. I'm trying not to commit to the idea of meeting with every single person who might be listening or who might ultimately apply for this, because that would be a lot of meetings. But we are certainly interested in seeing your application, making sure you name and articulate your work, and we'll do the best that we can to make sure you're put in a position to succeed with your application. REDI training and identifying how this participant. So I'm going to actually hit a pause on the next question here. I'm going to come back to it at the very end of this conversation. It is a great question, and I'm just skipping over it for the sake of making sure I think through my answer to that before I quickly resolve it. Next question I have is, we are intentional international headquartered in Dallas, therefore should our funds be solely for our Dallas chapter and activities? The short answer to that is yes. We are very focused on solving and addressing issues in Dallas County. And so we want to make sure that your applications and your funds are focused on and will be addressing needs in Dallas. Again, we have no restriction on how you use the funds, again, outside of the limited restrictions I named earlier around DEI training and political campaigns. So other than that, your funds are unrestricted, and we aren't going to tell you how you should spend it on salaries versus marketing versus any other thing you might be needing to use these dollars for. Last question I see on here is, what will the reporting requirements be if awarded the grant, interim and final grants, quarterly reports, et cetera? Thank you. There's another question here. Well, that's weird. I got a question in the middle. We are going to have limited reporting requirements. We are going to have, there will be some actual, like, we will do the work of coming back and understanding how you move the needle. It is one of the reasons why we were asking about how you will measure and use data in your work, because we want to be thoughtful about how we reflect the outcomes of our funding at the end of a year, or at the end of maybe it'll be middle of next year, as we think about this going forward. So that will be the only like actual reporting requirement. We will of course check in with you periodically, and we hope you'll take our phone calls and inquiries. We hope you'll think of us as partners in your work, because that's what we want to be. We want to walk alongside you as you do this work. We want to think about how we scale and replicate your work across our community, and make sure that everybody is getting an opportunity-rich environment to succeed and thrive in Dallas, and that you are helping us lead that way. So that's the only reporting requirement we are going to have, is literally around the measure you will acknowledge in your application you're trying to move, and how you'll try to measure that. And we will continue to walk alongside and otherwise support you in that requirement. Can a portion of the funds be used to provide a stipend to hire student interns to work on a core mission? So again, we aren't restricting how you use these dollars or how you achieve the mission of your work. We think it is important for great people to do the important work without us meddling or being in the middle of that. And we don't intend to tell you how to spend your dollars once we grant them. So if you would like to use them for a student stipend, please feel free. We think that's a fantastic idea as I sit here and read the question. But we aren't going to tell you exactly how to spend your dollars. We think this is important, and what we really want to make sure we're doing, what we're focused on, is making sure we close these gaps in our community, that we have, even if that's inching forward, that we have a strategy and a plan across our community to do this work. I also note that there's a bunch of questions happening in the chat, which I haven't been answering. Oh, you have been. Thank you, Brittany. I'm not going to try to sort through what I've missed, but if anybody needs or wants to come off, can people come off the mute? If anybody needs or wants to come off of mute to ask a question, we'll happily take your question live as well. I want to make sure we're giving everybody a chance to ask anything they need.
I may have to unmute people.
I see somebody who might have their hand up, but I don't know who. Janet Gardner.
That shouldn't have made me. Oh, all right, Jana, you still have a question? I unmuted you.
Oh.
My apologies, that was a mistake.
No, no worries.
Oh,
no worries. Not a mistake.
Rogue mouse.
We appreciate it. So there was a question earlier about DEI and it being sort of more, or DEI training and it being more white learner centered versus not. This is one of the reasons why we haven't committed to who will be doing this training, is because we want to understand who are the applicants for this work. We recognize some of the realities of that. And we're trying to be very thoughtful about our partnerships and the relationships we build to support and enable and engage our nonprofit partners in DEI work. And so there'll be a lot more that sort of comes with this. We've got a few months before there's actually a cohort to work together with. And we're doing some work in the background to make sure we enable and empower the right types of training and organizations to engage with and otherwise partner on the work. Perfect. I don't see any other questions, but I want to make sure I give space and time for anybody who might want to ask anything in addition.
I see Peter raised his hand.
Peter raised his hand.
I should not be in charge of this. Okay, let's figure this out together. There he is. Okay, Peter, sorry.
Can you hear me?
We
We
can.
can.
Technology, so wonderful.
No, sorry.
You know, it's only day 1000 of Zoom, but we're still working on it.
I get it. I get it. Our organization is Blacks United in Leading Technology, and by the name, our name, most of our board or all of our board were Black. We do have one person who is non-Black, and so that question about diversity of your board and your staff, we are predominantly Black, but not exclusively. Organizations that may be BIPOC in orientation, are they dinged because they don't have a lot of racial diversity in their leadership yet?
So the short answer to that is no. You won't be dinged. In fact, obviously having a majority board of BIPOC representation, I think, is a great standing or stat for understanding your work. So you won't be dinged because it's mostly Black people. You would literally have an organization focused on Blackness, and we think that that's a good fact in consideration for your application. So it will really come down to naming the work, right? So it's not just that you have a lot of black leaders or BIPOC leaders. It's also about, like, how are you helping people of color, whether they are Black or not, sort of address an inequity in the community that we know exists, or you may know better than anyone exists in the work. So that's the sort of the second wave is, great. Yeah, we're happy that you have a very diverse board, or at least a BIPOC, majority BIPOC board. The real question is ultimately, how are we going to do the work to address the needs of the community around the inequities you see or address?
Thank you.
No problem. I promised I would share our email addresses. I'm going to do that now so everybody can see it. Hopefully y'all can all see our addresses. My email address is dowusu@dallasfoundation.org, DOWUSU@dallasfoundation.org. And Brittany's is btrusty, BTRUSTY @dallasfoundation.org. Again, you will be able to find this video will be posted on the application website. You will be able to obviously contact or address us if you need anything. We are super excited. I really can't express this enough. Very, very excited about the road ahead, about what I hope will be a bunch of really fantastic and interesting applications to address inequity in our community. And we look forward to being a thought partner, an actual partner, and a wingman or sort of cheerleader for the work that you are doing to address inequity in our community. Again, we are purposely seeking to be disproportionate in our investment of time, effort, and energy, and certainly, obviously, in dollars, to this cause, because we think that that is the way that we are best or most likely to affect change in our community and to continue the path of progress that we all know and believe is possible in Dallas if we work together to do great things. So I want to thank you again for your time. We will, of course, be available resources to you in the event you need anything. And we look forward to your grant applications and partnership going forward. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, make sure that there are no more questions in the Q&A. I don't see any. If we didn't get to you or didn't get something, please make sure you reach out to Brittany or myself. We are, again, very excited about this work. We thank you again for your time this afternoon. And if you need anything from us, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Have a great afternoon.